We are joined now by our senior advisor for foreign policy and national security, the former acting director of national intelligence, former ambassador to Germany as well, which is certainly playing a role in this Ukraine matter and the invasion by Russia. We know the Russian troops are now surrounding every major Ukrainian city, including the capital, Kiev. I want to go right to Rick Grenell, who's joining us by phone today. I know he's at CPAC down in Florida. Rick, you tweeted out, and I retweeted this actually, that Joe Biden said the U.S. would pose an unprecedented set of sanctions if Putin invaded. The Germans said no, so Biden didn't go with SWIFT sanctions. I want to point out right away, we're not using SWIFT as a term like the word meaning SWIFT. SWIFT is a specific banking acronym. And Rick, because he could not get world buy-in for all this time he had to work on that, the Russians still have access to the world's financial markets.
Well, first of all, Jordan, I just have to say that's an amazing distinction because I never even imagined that people were thinking that we were using SWIFT to describe sanctions. You're exactly right. We need to stop for a second and explain it. SWIFT banking sanctions are the way that every single bank around the world does business. It's called the SWIFT system. And so if you would sanction the Russians from that system, they wouldn't have access to the world banking system. And we've done that in Iran, by the way. We've done this before with other countries. And, you know, the Germans didn't like it then, and they always tried to work around us. But look, I think we have a real problem with Germany. I think we've been saying this for about 4 years. The Germans have left the Western alliance. They want a transatlantic alliance that doesn't have a Western-facing flavor. And I think that's a real problem. And it also, I think, is particularly problematic for many Americans because generations of Americans have sacrificed for the Germans, and they need to understand that we have this special relationship between the Germans and the Americans, and we have tried to move on from the atrocities that the then German government perpetrated on the world. And yet we've rebuilt. Germany has been unified, and we've really tried to move forward. And yet I think it's a slap in the face to Americans to see the Germans reject the Western idea, continue going towards the Russian pipeline, and really I think they're undermining Europe, NATO, and the Western alliance.
I want to ask two questions, Rick. I'm going to play a soundbite in a moment. But let me ask you question one. Based on what has transpired so far, do you have any doubt that Vladimir Putin and Russia will be in control of Ukraine, including the capital of Kyiv, within days here?
You know, Jay, it's really sad for me to even ponder that question.
I know.
We shouldn't be in that situation. We're only in that situation because Donald Trump is not the president.
Yep.
There's no question if he was the president, we wouldn't be here.
He would have never gone in. Putin would have never done it.
Putin was, look, he took Georgia under George W. Bush. He took Crimea under President Biden. He didn't do anything under President Trump. He did not grab land and rewrite the borders of Europe. But now he's back to his old ways. And I think you've got to be able to distinguish from his plans under other presidents and his plans under President Trump. He didn't do a land grab, and that's because Donald Trump was unpredictable to him. He couldn't figure out what would happen.
Right.
Joe Biden is completely predictable. So it's a long answer to say I'm actually I'm in the pissed off phase that we have to answer questions like this between a terrible choice and a really terrible choice.
Yeah, I know.
If I were in charge and if I were, going to get to decide the policy of the United States, the first thing I would do is kick Joe Biden out of the White House.
Yeah, and I'd open up our oil reserves, and I would get the Keystone Pipeline finished immediately and get it functional. Now, I said that the first part because, Rick, the consensus is that Kyiv is going to fall and Zelensky's going to be out, or maybe an exiled government in Poland. But let me play for you a question that came from Nora O'Donnell over at CBS, and it was to Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State, because this is the next question. I cannot believe. Listen, I had family members. One side of my family was wiped out in the Holocaust, and the idea that we're now talking about a war in Eastern Europe again is I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. I really did not. Not with the fall of the Soviet Union. But listen to this question. I'll get you to comment.
Is there intelligence to suggest that President Putin will advance beyond Ukraine?
You don't need intelligence to tell you that that's exactly what President Putin wants. He's made clear that he'd like to reconstitute the Soviet Empire. Short of that, he'd like to reassert a sphere of influence around neighboring countries that were once part of the Soviet bloc. Now, when it comes to a threat beyond Ukraine's borders, there's something very powerful standing in his way. That's Article 5 of NATO. An attack on one is an attack on all.
So, Rick, here's my question. If Vladimir Putin were to attack, say, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, three of the countries that border directly on him or either on Russia or Belarus, and Article 5 was implemented, troops get in harm's way real quick.
Look, it just infuriates me that we're having to have this discussion. Joe, this was avoidable. When you're messaging to the world for weeks that there's a bloody war on Wednesday, and as an American president, you don't take peaceful measures like sanctions or variety of other tools that the United States could do peacefully. When you don't take those measures, and yet there's a bloody war coming on Wednesday, I would say that's un-American. Americans don't sit back when there's an absolute, blood war killing spree coming. And let's be very clear. Joe Biden said he was 100% true, 100% in belief that this was a bloody war that was coming very soon, and yet he failed to act. So, look, we've got to stand for NATO. If NATO members in Article 5 are not enforced, then I fear the collapse of the whole system. And so I think
such a dramatic
NATO
moment in
country,
time, Rick, historically.
Yeah.
Just so, go ahead, Jordan. But it is a dramatic moment in time when you realize how close he will be to being able to pull something like that off, or trying to.
Rick, you talk about your anger that we're even at this point, but then we've got President Biden when he was talking to the media. Well, I'll just play it for you. It's pretty unbelievable what he said.
No one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. This is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about.
So, Rick, we've been told that these sanctions that have been announced even yesterday will take more than a month to really implement. It doesn't include the SWIFT banking sanctions like we include. But the president and his team, Rick, had months to work on this so that a sanctions regime could have been put in place that may have, at least would have been the potential to prevent this conflict. But as President Biden said, Rick, he already believed that nothing he could do was going to prevent this war.
Well, let me just tell you, I am at CPAC, as you said, and at 3:30 today, I'm delivering a speech that really goes to the heart of what you're talking about. And in summary, I believe that official Washington has now come into this cycle of crisis and shoving the State Department aside and immediately going for troops and military action. And the State Department exists to avoid war. And when diplomats fail, then we have war. And I think it's very clear that our diplomats failed. They failed to stop a war. They failed to use every tool that they had available. For some reason, official Washington raced to the military option without utilizing the State Department diplomatic measures. I believe that diplomacy with muscle can avoid war, and we didn't have that. So I'm going to outline how I believe the State Department should be reformed, how Washington, D.C. should be reformed when it comes to viewing crises. And I just thought of something. After I deliver this speech, I think I will give it to our team and have it posted on ACLJ.org.
That'd be great.
As an exclusive, so that if you miss the speech, you can read it at ACLJ.org.
Yeah, that would be great, Rick. We really appreciate that. As you mentioned about diplomacy is power. It was Disraeli who famously said diplomacy is war if you use the power correctly, but if you avoid bullets. And unfortunately, this has been handled horribly. Rick, we appreciate it. Thanks as always.